School is a scam. The words fell from Promise's lips as tears streamed down his face. He sat on the edge of his tiny bed in a rented one-room apartment in the city, clutching his degree certificate like it was a cursed paper. His hands shook violently. His heart pounded like a drum of betrayal. This was the same certificate the village elders celebrated with dancing when he graduated. The same paper his mother had kissed with trembling hands, whispering that her son would become the wealthiest man their community had ever known. Yet now, after 3 years of endless applications, after countless humiliating interviews, after wearing down his only suit until it smelled of sweat and disappointment, Promise had nothing. No job, no money, no respect, just rejection after rejection. That night, in his loneliness, he picked up the phone and called his mother. His voice broke as he confessed the truth. "Mama, maybe they were right. Maybe school is just a scam." His mother froze. He could hear her breathing, heavy and worried. Then she asked the question that ripped him apart. "Promise, what are we going to tell the village now?" Because the village had sold their goats, their chickens, and even pooled together their savings to send him to the city. They saw him as their golden ticket, their pride, their hope. And now he was nothing. But what happened next will leave you shocked. Before I continue, make sure you subscribe and like this story right now, because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about school, success, and the real meaning of wealth. Years earlier, Promise wasn't always this broken man. Back then he was the village star. He grew up in a community where children dropped out early to work on farms, where girls were married off before they finished secondary school, and where survival was the only dream. But Promise was different. From childhood, he had a hunger for knowledge. He would sit under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, reading his textbooks long after others had fallen asleep. His father, who died when Promise was only 12, left behind one piece of advice. "Son, education will open doors that farming never can. Do not stop reading." And Promise obeyed. By the time he reached secondary school, teachers praised him as a genius. He always came first in class, never second. His notebooks were filled with neat handwriting. His answers always complete. His hunger for excellence unmatched. While others memorized, Promise understood. When he sat for national exams, he scored among the top 10 in the entire region. The whole village rejoiced. Elders slaughtered a goat in his honor. Women ululated and danced, declaring that the village's poverty had finally met its end. "This boy will become a doctor," they said. "Or a lawyer," others added. "No, an engineer." Everyone had their vision of the riches Promise would bring. So, when it came time for him to go to university, the village gathered. Some gave money, some gave yams, others sold livestock. It was not just his family's effort. It was the entire community's sacrifice. The day he left for the city, Promise's mother held his hand and whispered, "Remember who you are. You carry all of us in your heart. Do not fail." Promise vowed he would not. At university, Promise did not just excel. He shone like a diamond. He studied late into the night, survived on cheap noodles, and pushed himself until his body gave in to exhaustion. But it paid off. He graduated with the highest honors. Professors congratulated him. Friends envied him. And when he walked across that stage to receive his degree, the audience erupted with applause. In his heart, he saw visions of a golden future. A high-paying job, a car, a house for his mother, scholarships for the village children. He saw himself as the savior of his people. But life had other plans. After graduation, reality hit like a storm. He applied to over 100 jobs, sometimes sending 10 applications in a single day. For months, nothing. Not even a phone call. Finally, a company invited him for an interview. He wore his only suit, borrowed from a friend, and walked into the office with trembling hope. But when the interviewer asked about his experience, he stuttered. Experience? How could he have experience when he had just graduated? He was rejected on the spot. That pattern repeated over and over again. Job after job. Interview after interview. Some companies didn't even respond. Others told him politely that he was overqualified for junior roles but too inexperienced for senior ones. Promise grew desperate. His landlord threatened to throw him out for unpaid rent. He skipped meals to save money. His once bright eyes grew hollow with despair. The breaking point came when, after waiting 6 hours for an interview, a receptionist handed him back his file without opening it and said, "Sorry, sir. The position has already been given to the manager's nephew." That night, he collapsed on his bed, whispering through his tears, "School is a scam." But if Promise thought this was the lowest point of his life, he was wrong. Because the real storm was yet to come. And then came the phone call that would change everything. It was from the village chief. His voice was stern, heavy, and filled with disappointment. "Promise, the people are asking questions. They gave you everything. They trusted you. And now they say you have failed them. Should we have sent someone else instead?" Promise froze. His world spun. His hands shook so hard the phone almost dropped. At that moment, Promise realized. His entire village had lost faith in him. But what he decided to do next would shock them all. Promise dropped the phone and sat in silence, the chief's words echoing in his ears. Should we have sent someone else instead? That one question stabbed deeper than any rejection letter. It wasn't just his dream crumbling. It was the dream of an entire community. For weeks, Promise avoided calls from the village. He couldn't bear to hear the disappointment in their voices. His mother tried to comfort him, but even she sometimes slipped and asked, "Promise, are you sure things will get better?" He had no answer. Rent piled up. The landlord banged on his door every morning. He owed money to friends he had borrowed from. His clothes no longer fit properly. He had lost too much weight. Even the city seemed to mock him. Every time he walked past tall buildings filled with office workers, he felt like a ghost drifting through a world he would never enter. And then, one Sunday afternoon, the unthinkable happened. He returned from another fruitless interview to find his few belongings thrown into the street. His landlord stood there, arms crossed. "Promise," the man said coldly. "You are educated, yes? Then you should know. Rent is not paid with certificates." Humiliation burned through his chest as neighbors whispered and pointed. Promise gathered his torn clothes and dog-eared books into a small bag, his degree certificate sticking out like a cruel reminder. With nowhere to go, no money for food, and no hope for the future, he took the only decision left. He boarded a rickety bus back to the village. When he arrived, children who once shouted his name with pride stared at him in confusion. Adults whispered behind his back. Some shook their heads in pity, others in anger. "Is this the one who was supposed to save us?" they murmured. "So it is true. School is a scam." Promise felt like a walking failure. His mother embraced him tightly, tears soaking her face, but even her hug couldn't wash away the shame. For days he stayed indoors, refusing to step outside. Depression sank its claws into him. He barely ate. He couldn't sleep. The village had given up everything for him, and he had given them nothing in return. One evening, lying on his mat, a thought pierced through his darkness. If I cannot give them wealth with my degree, maybe I can give them wealth another way. The next morning, Promise forced himself to the village farm. The same land where his father once tilled the soil before his death. The same land he had abandoned for education. First he was clumsy. His hands, once used to holding pens, blistered quickly from the hoe. His back ached. His legs trembled. Other farmers laughed at him. "Look at the graduate," one shouted. "He's finally learning where real food comes from." But Promise ignored them. Day after day he worked. He woke before sunrise, tilled the soil, planted maize, beans, and vegetables. But he didn't just farm the old way. While in the city, he had read books on agriculture, watched videos on modern farming techniques, and studied how other countries grew food on a massive scale. He began applying that knowledge. He experimented with spacing seeds differently, mixing organic manure with fertilizer, and timing his irrigation more carefully. Slowly, his farm started looking different. The crops grew taller, greener, healthier. The same people who mocked him began to watch with curiosity. But Promise wasn't satisfied with just growing food for survival. He wanted more. He wanted revenge. Not against anyone but against failure itself. Against the lie that his education was useless. When harvest time came, he carried his produce to the city market. Vendors laughed at him at first. But when they saw the quality of his crops, fresh, large and well packaged, they stopped laughing. His vegetables sold out faster than others. Buyers began asking for more. Within weeks, Promise was making more money than he ever imagined. Not only could he feed his mother, he could save money. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. And then came the twist. A company executive in the city bought Promise's crops and was stunned by their quality. He asked, "Where do you get this from?" When Promise replied, "From my village," the man shook his head. "Impossible. No village farm produces like this." Promise smiled. "Well, mine does." The executive leaned closer. "Can you supply more? Consistently?" Promise's heart pounded. This was the opportunity he had been praying for. But he knew he couldn't handle it alone. He would need workers, equipment, and larger land. And so, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He began employing young people from the same village who once mocked him. First, they were hesitant. But when they saw how much he was earning, they jumped in. He trained them, teaching them both traditional farming and the modern techniques he had learned. Within months, the entire community's fortunes began to change. But success comes with enemies. One evening, as Promise counted his earnings under the dim glow of a lantern, his mother burst into the room, face pale with fear. "Promise," she cried. "They are coming for you." He stood up, heart racing. "Who?" Her voice trembled. "The city merchants. They say you are destroying their business." Promise froze. The very people who once rejected him were now threatened by his rise. And what they did next nearly destroyed everything he had built. The night air was heavy. Promise sat in silence, his mother's warning replaying in his mind. "They are coming for you." For the first time since he returned to the village, fear replaced hope in his heart. The city merchants, men who had controlled the food markets for decades, saw him as a threat. His cheaper, fresher produce was ruining their monopoly. And men like that didn't fight fair. 2 days later, the storm arrived. Promise's workers rushed to his home early in the morning, panic on their faces. "Promise!" one shouted. "Your crops, someone has destroyed them." Promise sprinted to the farm, his chest pounding. When he arrived, his stomach turned. Rows of vegetables lay crushed under boot prints. Bags of fertilizer were ripped open and poured onto the ground. The irrigation pipes he had saved for months to buy were slashed into pieces. It was sabotage. Some workers cursed loudly. Others broke into tears. Weeks of sweat, labor, and hope, gone in one night. Promise fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he grabbed a fistful of soil. "Why?" he whispered. His voice cracked with despair. "Why must success be punished?" Word spread quickly. Villagers gathered around, murmuring. "This is why no one should rise above their level," one elder said bitterly. "Those city people will crush him," another whispered. Even some of Promise's workers muttered, "Maybe we should stop. It's not worth the risk." For the first time, Promise felt abandoned. That night, lying on his mat, he stared at the ceiling with hollow eyes. Dark thoughts crept into his mind. Maybe the merchants were right. Maybe education, farming, everything was pointless. Maybe he should just quit. But then he remembered his father's words. "Son, do not stop reading. Education will open doors." Promise sat up suddenly. His father hadn't been wrong. He had just misunderstood the door. Education wasn't about certificates. It was about knowledge. About using what you learned to create something new. And that was exactly what he had been doing with the farm. He clenched his fists. I will not stop. They can destroy my crops, but they will never destroy my mind. The next morning, he called a meeting with his workers and the villagers. I know many of you are scared, he said, his voice steady. I know some of you want to give up. But listen to me. The real scam is not school. It's believing that only one path leads to success. If we stop now, they win. But if we rise together, they will never stop us again. First there was silence. Then one of the young men stepped forward. Promise, if you continue, I will stand with you. Another followed. Then another. Until the whole crowd shouted, We stand with you. Promise's eyes burned with tears. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them. Together they replanted. Day and night they worked the fields. Promise introduced even better methods. Crop rotation, organic pesticides, and storage systems to protect against sabotage. This time they guarded the farms in shifts, refusing to be intimidated. Weeks later, the new crops flourished stronger than ever before. The harvest was even bigger than the last. But the merchants did not give up. When Promise tried to deliver his produce to the city, thugs blocked the road. They overturned his truck, spilling vegetables into the dirt. Promise stood there, fists clenched as they laughed. This market belongs to us, one sneered. Go back to your village, boy. Promise's workers wanted to fight, but he held them back. Violence would solve nothing. Instead, he returned home with rage boiling in his chest. That night he made a bold decision. If the city markets would not accept him, he would create his own. Promise transformed part of the village square into a marketplace. He used his savings to buy wooden stalls, banners, and even hired transport to bring in customers from nearby towns. He named it the People's Market. On the opening day, people came in droves. They marveled at the fresh produce, the fair prices, and the honesty of the sellers. Word spread quickly. The best food was no longer in the city. It was in Promise's village. The merchants panicked. They tried lowering their prices, but customers no longer trusted them. They tried bribing the villagers, but Promise had already given them something money couldn't buy. Dignity. For the first time in decades, power shifted. A small forgotten village became the center of trade. Children who once went hungry now ate full meals. Parents who once struggled to survive now had money to send their kids to school. Promise watched it all with quiet pride. But just when he thought the worst was over, another test came, one that would shake him to his core. Late one night, as Promise was walking home from the new market, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and froze. It was one of the city merchants, holding a gun. You've ruined everything, the man hissed. Tonight it ends. Promise's heart stopped. His mind raced. The barrel of the gun glistened under the faint moonlight. Promise's breath grew shallow, his pulse hammering in his chest. The merchant's eyes burned with hatred. You think you're smart, don't you? The man hissed. You think you can embarrass us, ruin our business, and get away with it? Tonight, boy, you die. Promise froze. He thought of his mother. He thought of his father's words. He thought of the children in the village who finally had hope. For a moment, fear paralyzed him. But then a strange calmness filled his soul. He spoke, voice trembling but steady. If you kill me, you don't just kill a man. You kill a whole community's future. But let me tell you something. The world is changing. You can stop me, but you can't stop the truth. Knowledge belongs to everyone now. And the truth is this. School alone does not make us successful. It is what we do with what we know that shapes the future. The man's hand shook. For a moment, Promise thought it was over. But then, torches lit up behind him. Dozens of villagers poured into the path, led by the chief, his mother, and Promise's workers. They had been watching, protecting him silently. Put the gun down, the chief thundered. His voice was firm, commanding. This boy is not just one of us. He is all of us. The merchant hesitated, but when he saw the villagers closing in, he dropped the gun and fled into the darkness. Promise collapsed to his knees, shaking. His mother rushed forward, wrapping him in her arms. "You lived, my son," she whispered. "God kept you because your work is not done." That night, Promise realized something. His survival was not luck, it was purpose. He had been spared to carry a message bigger than himself. Months passed, and the village market flourished beyond imagination. The people's market grew into a regional hub. Trucks from the city now came willingly, not to intimidate, but to buy. The very merchants who once sabotaged him returned, not with weapons, but with contracts, begging for partnerships. Promise agreed, but only under one condition. They must pay fair prices, respect local farmers, and invest in training young people. Surprisingly, they agreed. Because they had no choice, the power had shifted. Years later, Promise stood before a large crowd at a regional conference on education and development. Government officials, educators, businessmen, and parents all listened as he told his story. He held up his degree certificate with one hand and a hoe with the other. "This paper," he said, shaking the degree, "is not useless. But it is not everything. Education is not a scam. The scam is believing that it ends in classrooms and certificates. True education is when knowledge meets action, when we use what we learn to solve problems, create jobs, and build communities." The hall erupted in applause. Some people wept openly. Back in the village, Promise started a training center for young people. He called it the School of Hands and Mind. There, graduates learned farming, carpentry, technology, and entrepreneurship side by side with academics. He often told them, "Do not despise your education, but do not worship it either. The world does not reward certificates, it rewards solutions." As years went by, Promise's village transformed. Once poor and forgotten, it became a shining example for the entire nation. Families that once struggled now thrived. Children who once dropped out now had hope, not just for jobs but for purpose. And whenever journalists asked Promise if school was truly a scam, he smiled and replied, "No, school is not the scam. The scam is raising children to believe that paper alone guarantees success. True education is everywhere, in books, in farms, in struggles, in failures. And when knowledge and action unite, there is no limit to what we can achieve." The story of Promise spread far beyond his village. Across Africa and beyond, parents, teachers, and leaders began rethinking what education meant. Slowly, a new understanding was born. Success is not about chasing jobs, it is about creating value. And so, the boy who once returned home in shame became a beacon of hope to the world. Education is never a waste, but it is never enough by itself. True power lies in combining knowledge with action, courage, and creativity. The world doesn't reward certificates, it rewards those who solve real problems. And to everyone listening, if you've ever felt like a failure because life didn't go the way school promised, remember Promise's story. Your certificate is just one tool. Your true success lies in your hands, your mind, and your courage to keep going.